Hello, I want to speak with you a little bit about Chapter 6 and state legislatures. I pulled my laptop camera a little closer so you can hear me better, hopefully. State legislatures, Chapter 6, Thomas Dye, focus on a number of things. State legislatures, they make law, obviously, all kinds of law, everything from environment to school law to construction sites to how property taxes might be collected to state taxes to whether dogs can be sitting in the back of a pickup when it's moving. It could be anything. Here in Tennessee, they focus a lot on rural law because most legislators are from rural towns and locations. It's a very rural state. So there's an awful lot of agricultural law, environmental law, and taxing law, and probably not as much educational law as we would find maybe in a more populated state. But lawmaking is the major function of state legislatures, as well as budgeting. They are provided typically with a framework of a budget by the governor at the beginning of the fiscal year, which is typically January 1 in most states. In many states, though, it is July 1. And they will look at that framework of a budget, pick it apart, and then determine how they can reduce the cost. And if the governor is of the same party, make the governor look good. If the governor is of a different party, let's say this legislature is mostly Republican and the governor is Democrat, then the other party will try to make the governor look like he's a high spender. Not unusual. But budgeting is very important because state legislatures have a balanced budget requirement. Unlike the national government, which does not have one, state legislatures have a balanced budget requirement. So they have to find a way where revenue will match expenditure. And they typically do this over a couple of years because nobody knows exactly to the penny how much revenue will come in by the end of the year in which they're spending that same money. So they typically go 2 years to make sure that the revenue from the earlier year is used, and if it's not, if there's some extra, it'll be pushed over to the following year. Same thing with the bills for expenditures. Other things, though, that state legislatures do is the individual representatives serve their constituents in many ways. You can call them up on the phone and give them what for, if you will, or yell at them or tell them how wonderful they are. They are also, in terms of constituent services, they will respond to problems. You can't get your driveway extended to the road because there's some kind of an odd county law that you've never heard of. You can call your state legislature. If the museum hours are not good for your school system and you don't know why, you can call the state legislature, state legislator. If your Medicaid, which is partly paid by states, check isn't what you thought it should be, you can call your state legislature. And they have a number of staff people who get on the phone and email and find out why things aren't being done the way you think they should be. Why do they do such a thing? They want your vote to stay in office. And if they didn't do those things, you wouldn't vote for them. You'd vote for the next person, the next election, and find somebody who will help you get what you're after from the state and the county, if you will. They also are responsible, state legislatures or state assemblies are responsible for oversight. They monitor the many state agencies, whether it's Division of Motor Vehicles or Transportation or Agriculture or the Auditing Unit or Education. State legislatures are responsible, state assemblies, for auditing to ensure that those departments that are located in the executive branch, which we'll talk about next chapter 7, that those agencies that respond to the governor are doing what they're supposed to do. So the state assembly, chapter 6, the legislature, makes the law, creates the budget, approves it, and then another responsibility, makes sure that the money is being spent properly and correctly according to the law, those departments being in the governor's, in the other branch of government, the governor's branch of government, the executive branch. Oversight very important. If it's found that there's some sort of malfeasance is occurring, or there's a wonderful person who sends a letter and says he knows there's fraud going on, whistleblowers, if they pop up from somewhere, the state legislature typically responds by creating a committee, an oversight investigative committee with a couple of law persons from outside the county, a different county, and they swoop on in and check things out to find out who's doing these bad things, if in fact they're bad at all. Holding the whistleblower harmless most of the time. A lot of times the whistleblower gets impacted on by losing their job in one way or another, but that's a whole other discussion for Chapter 9, which is criminal justice and the law. Who are these state legislatures? Oh, wait a minute, I forgot one thing, very important thing that they do. They campaign. They are always campaigning. Whether it's kissing babies or kissing goalposts at a football game, or kissing the state flag, whatever it might be. They do a lot of schmoozing and petting and smiling and sending out information. Most state legislators, like the one from here, District 3, have websites, and I get email all the time from legislator so-and-so. How does he get my email address? Simple. I vote, and so when I vote, I tell them my email. Do I want to get newsletter information? Sure, I want to get it. It's free. It comes off the computer, and helps me keep up with the myriad of legislative activities that our legislatures are supposed to be involved in. So if you want to do a kind of a neat thing, look up if you're in Tennessee or if you're in Kentucky, look up your state assembly, find out the name of your district assemblyman, and you can. I think most states have a little query box. You put in the name of the town or county you're in, and up comes the name and email address, and email them and say you want to get on the newsletter. They all have newsletters, and get your free weekly or monthly diatribe of information, important governmental information, so you can keep up with what they're doing. Okay, well, who are these folks? These are people. Are they like you and I? Well, I don't know who you and I are, but I don't know who you are, but are they typical residents in the state that they come from? Yes. Generally speaking, state assemblymen or legislators are a little more educated, a little more wealthy, a little more landed, that is, they own a little more land. They come a little bit more from rural areas because most of the states that we live in, most of the countryside is rural. They have a lot more connections typically with others in governments, and they communicate more, and they transport themselves more. So are they like the average constituent? No. For example, the average constituent in the state of Tennessee makes, in terms of money, somewhere between $25,000 to $30,000 a year. It's not a lot of money compared to wealthier people, and it's a lot of money compared to poorer people. The average state legislator in the state of Tennessee makes about $55,000 a year. They don't make that's not what they're paid from the state legislature. That's what they're paid from the business they own, or the real job they have, or from speaking engagements and other things. Legislation, being a state assemblyman, is a part-time job, or it's supposed to be. As you'll see, more state legislatures are now becoming full-time and more professional, and so the pay is going up a little bit, but most state legislators receive a part-time emolument of about $15,000 to $20,000 a year, and then they have a personal job that they do. Sometimes they're not all lawyers. In fact, lawyering is not the most frequent job in the state legislature. Owning a small business is the most frequent job. Then you have a lot of educators, you have a lot of lawyers, a lot of professionals. So who are these folks? They are like you and I, and they live here, and they love the state they live in, they love the county they live in, and they love the district they're in, but they're a little bit atypical in the ways we mentioned. So why do they run for office? And again, let me remind you, the purpose of our discussion here is not for me to teach you the chapter. You have to go to the chapter. I'm simply guiding you in some important facts. Why do they run for office? Usually, one of several reasons. Check out all those reasons, very important to know, but I'm going to tell you a couple of them. One is that they love the area they're in, and they are vested in that area. They've lived in that area for a while, and they feel strongly about citizenship and civil duty, and so they'll run for public office because they love living in Claiborne County and they want to make Claiborne County a better area, let's say. A second and more frequent reason, though, is there's something going on that really bothers them, a particular issue that they feel they want to go to the state legislature and work with. Maybe the level of education in the county stinks and they want to make it better. Maybe they live near a nuclear power plant down there in Knox County somewhere, and it's old, and they're tired of the safety hazards of it. Maybe they live out in Buncombe County somewhere in the western part of the state, very rural, and there's a lot of land runoff from fertilizers and from insecticides, and the county water is horrible. They want to go. Maybe it's a national issue like abortion politics or gun control or freedom to have concealed weapons, and these are issues. So sometimes a person runs for legislature or assemblyman because they have a single or a couple of issues that they're really focused on. They want to bring that to the attention of the state assembly. Another matter you want to look at closely, and I'm going to go a little quicker here because we don't have all the time in the world. I only did 15 minutes on my little videos. You want to look at districting. You want to look closely at the case known as Baker versus Carr. That's where it became allowable for our districts to become the districts that legislatures come from to be changed from time to time. Districts are population driven. So when there's more population in a district, you're going to have legislators coming from that district more than they will from another. That changing of districts and the addition of population-based districts is referred to as reapportionment. It happens every 10 years. These are state legislators. The number of federal U.S. representatives also comes from the decennial census that happens every 10 years at the national level. Either way, the term malapportionment suggests that there are more people in one district than another, and so instead of honoring the idea of one person, one vote, one district would have more legislative representation than another. That would be malapportionment. Check out the term gerrymandering. Has to do with when districts are created, and there's a good example of this in chapter 7 in the text, where districts become, they look like alligators or monsters, the way they're put together in some crazy pattern in order for the bigger party to gain more power. They want more people of the same party to be in those districts. So check out gerrymandering, and also racial gerrymandering has a lot to do with making sure that persons who are in a minority group have a representative in the legislature from a district that's made up of minority members, sometimes minority members, African Americans in an urban area. Maybe they don't live all together, so the district has to be racially gerrymandered so that its district boundaries incorporate many from the same group so that they have an opportunity to have a district represented by someone like themselves. Check out the idea of splintering and packing. Again, these have to do with malapportionment or reapportionment. And also look at the criteria for good districting. The criteria typically is equal proportion of people, that the districts are compact, that they are contiguous, that is one right after the other, nice, neat packages. And very importantly, we try not to, assemblies try not to divide cities or other jurisdictions like towns and villages. We try to keep those in one district or another. Other discussion in this chapter, main discussion of the chapter, how does a bill become a law? I want you to look at that thoroughly from the time. Try to always remember that a bill can be created by anyone, but it can only be submitted to the legislature by a representative. So Martin Sellers could create a bill about bicycles on the highway, having licenses, and I could get people to agree to it, but I'd have to, the only way I can get a state assembly to look at a bill is to have an assemblyman introduce it into the system. It goes through a whole system, as you'll see in the text, and you need to look at this real closely. This is good fuel for one of an essay questions coming down the road next test. how does that bill actually become a law? It's got hearings before the Assembly 3 times. There are amendments that get attached. There are committees that it has to get through. There's a final committee when the State House and the Senate don't agree on their written document, when the written portion of the bill, version of the bill. A conference committee has to be created. And then lastly, governors sign the bill. So look at that whole process and be intimately aware of how that operates. There's a big discussion about professional and non-professional assemblies. Take a look at those. What makes an assembly professional? What makes it non-professional? You need to know that. And then legislative leadership and legislative roles. Leadership are those who are committee chairs. There are committee whips. There are leadership in the different parties. You want to know what those are. But importantly, you want to know the different roles that a state assemblyman can have. He or she can be a trustee. That is, once she's elected, she votes any way she wants because she feels she's been entrusted by the people based on her education, location, gender, wealth level, and so on. Some legislative representatives see their role as delegate, D-E-L-E-G-A-T-E. That is, they are elected, and then they keep a real close pulse on their district, and they'll vote the way the district wants them to vote, rather than the trustee that votes the way he or she feels they should vote. The political role is one where they determine that there'll be a trustee in some cases and a delegate based on what the home district wants from them in other cases. And they sort of walk a fine line there between being a delegate and a trustee. Other factor with regard to legislative politics is lobbying. A lot of folks out there banging on the doors of your state representative. They want something. They want to tell them something. It's not a lot of unethical practices as we think of. The term lobbying is a negative connotation. Mostly, lobbyists inform the representatives to give them an idea about what it is they want done and how they should do it and why. And so lobbyists are actually very important to the legislative process. I've given you a little more than 15 minutes. I hope we've done well, and email me if you can, if you want to, and I'll answer your questions. Bye.